I'm going to do mussels in a saffron broth. It might seem strange that we have saffron in Irish cooking because essentially it's a Spanish spice or a Middle Eastern spice. But from a recent book I did on Irish food, we reckon that saffron has been used from at least the 16th century, but certainly since the 19th century in Ireland. And it has a great use in bread and in all sorts of stews. So I tried to incorporate that element into the recipe while I was writing this. So mussels by their nature cook very, very quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to fry off our onions and some herbs and then add our stock. And it's really, really important that we have our stock at the boil before the mussels go in, because if the mussels go into cold stock, then it will take longer to open. And being a mussel, they'll naturally just dry out. So some nice extra virgin rapeseed oil and a little bit of butter. And of course, my little bit is a lot sometimes, I've been told. But you can leave out the butter if you want to just make this with oil, but just make sure you make it with a nice flavoursome oil, because that oil is going to come through into the recipe. So once we hear the butter starting to sizzle, we can add in our onions. And the reason why we put the oil in as well to begin with is that it'll help stop our butter burning. So our onions are going to go in. And just make sure you give them a good stir and that they're completely coated in the butter. And the salt helps bring out the flavour of the onion, but it also helps break down onion flavour. So I'm going to put in a small selection of herbs. Generally when I'm frying onions in anything, if it's for a stew or even for a stock, I generally put a selection of herbs in with it, and it really just helps add an extra dimension of aroma to the dish. So it could be sage or thyme or rosemary, anything like that. You can chop them up if you want, or you can just pop them in with your onions and then you can take them out when you're serving the stew. And anything you add in now will really just help the depth of flavour in the dish. And again, the heat will pull the essential oils out of those herbs and transfer that flavour into your onions. So next is going to go in our wine. You can use cider if you want, or if you're cooking for the family or kids and you don't want to use wine, you can just use water. And we're going to let that come to the boil, and most of the alcohol will burn off. If you're picking a wine that you're going to cook with, just make sure it's a wine that you like the taste of, because that's what you're going to be left with, not the alcohol. So we're just heating up some fish stock. One nice thing actually would be to use seawater. You just have to, if you're using seawater to cook mussels in, which is very traditional in Ireland, just make sure that you pull back on the salt, because the seawater is about 3.5%, so it is going to give the dish quite a salty character. So next we're going to put in our saffron. And saffron is very, very expensive. And the reason why it's so expensive is that these little filaments, you get 4 out of each flower head. And this is most of this is picked by hand. So you can imagine if you get 4 of them out of each flower, how much or how many flowers you need. But an inexpensive ingredient you could use instead would be turmeric, which is used quite a lot in Indian cooking, but it's also used in European cooking in place of saffron, because it will also give you that yellow flavour. Okay. So I'm going to add in my fish stock now. Now I've already brought that to the boil, and this is just to speed up the process. If it was cold going in, we just have to wait a little longer. And I've just put in enough fish stock to take in, I have about 1 kilo of mussels. But again, if you have less mussels, just put in less fish stock. And mussels are a super rich food in terms of their vitamins, minerals and proteins, and they cook extremely quickly. They'll cook anywhere from 1 minute up to 3 minutes depending on the batch. Just make sure they're in an even pile and that they have enough liquid through them. Some may open straight away, but I usually try and find, like this guy here, he's already cooked. But you want to just wait till they all open. So I'm just going to cover them for about 1 minute and then give them a little shake and we should be ready. So our mussels are ready, piping hot and all open. Or again, you can serve this straight onto the table, and if you have extra broth left over at the end, that can be frozen, and then you can use that in another fish stock or fish stew.